Hello and welcome to the Creators Guild podcast. I'm Chris Howell and with me,
Jared Lovelady.
and we're here to talk about all things creative. And we are going to have a little bit of a special show today. The last two guests that were on, Miller Thomas and Lynn Combs, will both be joining us today, and we're going to have kind of a roundtable discussion, talk together about a few different things, toss some ideas around. Should be fun. But we're going to start off as we always do, reading a chapter from A Flight from Shadows. If you haven't gotten your copy, head over to Amazon and order one from there. You can get the ebook or the paperback, either one. Today, we're going to dive in. Last time we read chapter 25, Discovering Secrets in the Bronze Palace. Today we're on chapter 26. Gladiators. Cycle of Ryo, year 12, 182. Violence can grow and live in even the most timid of hearts. Ancient Wood Elf saying. Late afternoon sun broke through the shapeless clouds, painting the arena floor with a cascade of gold. The light played out across ornate stone pillars, ringing the arena, casting shadows that mirrored the deep hues of the sky. In finely decorated cushioned chairs just above the arena floor sat Tawara and Athandra, accompanied by Graythan. Tawara leaned forward in her seat, taking in the whole of the vast arena, a sight both new and novel to her naive eyes. The arena floor was a large oval, some 80 paces long and 50 paces wide. A 5-foot wooden wall ran along the north straight. The east and west ends were lined with pavilions for selling food and trinkets, along with huts for preparations, resting, and a place for healers. Around the perimeter of the arena stood white-robed men and women ready to tend to any injuries or perform necessary tasks when required. Above the wall were stands with rows of benches sparsely populated with small groups of people intentionally seated so as not to be too close to one another. The south straight was open to a grass-covered hill dotted with a smattering of people sitting on blankets or standing closer to the wall in an effort to see the events of the day. Nestled in the stands was a raised box covered with a fine silk awning that overlooked the arena floor. It sheltered the most honored of guests. The brightly colored flags of the trade guild waved in the breeze from tall poles at its corners and distinguished it from the smaller boxes to each side. Among those populating the box, along with Tawara and Athandra, was the host of the afternoon events. Vice Chairman Duran sat in a raised, well-padded chair that was finely carved and worked in gold. On either side of him, in equally lavish seats, sat her father and Premier Corvin. The vice chairman and Corvin chattered casually, voices raised just enough to be heard by those in close proximity. A fine afternoon for an exposition, a cooling breeze, fine wine. Duran held up his tall goblet of rich red wine, and the best of company. You are in for a treat, my friend. I have heard that this crop of Alkari fighters is among the best that Narvosh has ever trained. Corvin nodded as he took a goblet from the tray being offered to him by a buxom serving woman in a low-cut dress of house colors. Yes, so I have heard. It should be rather interesting indeed, he replied. Tawara smirked as she caught Corvin's eyes lingering on the woman's cleavage. She knew the Premier would never give the woman a second thought, but even the stoic, unflinching Corvin couldn't resist so much exposed bosom, apparently. She wondered what house the woman might be from in the city, and if such displays worked to curry favor in Perome. She watched Graythan as he motioned to the woman. Over here, lass. Our throats are parched and in need of your fine wares, he said before taking 2 of the goblets from her worked silver tray. He handed one of the goblets to Tawara. She smiled as she saw his eyes flash downward, then quickly dart away. Here you are, my lady. We wouldn't want you to enjoy the exhibition less for want of refreshment, now would we? Tawara took the goblet of wine, smiling. It was apparent that Graythan was eager to pick up his pursuits from where he had left off the evening before. Thank you, good sir. I admit the warm afternoon air has indeed left me desiring a little refreshment. She smelled the dark red liquid in the glass, and smiled again. It was of Drow vintage, her favorite. Would you be so kind as to pass one along to my handmaid as well? We would not want her lack of comfort to interfere with her duties, should I have need of them. At that she chuckled, and took a sip of the dark rich wine. Yes, of course, how rude of me. My apologies, Athandra, he replied. Taking a third goblet from the tray, he offered it to her with what was apparently his usual flourish. Here you are, my lady. Athandra took the goblet with a nod and an appreciative thank you. Waiting until Graythan's back was to her, she rolled her eyes at Tawara. Tawara simply smiled back and mouthed to her, Behave. Taking a deep drink from her goblet, she turned back to him. Graythan, what may we expect to see today? Expect to see, he replied with a wry smile. Why, only the finest display of brute and prowess in all the realms. Tawara started to ask for more information when Graythan looked past her, calling out, Aiden, where are you off to? There is a seat here. Come and join us. Tawara turned to see a plump, rather self-important-looking young man in deep blue, silver-lined robes at the top of the stairs that descended to the arena floor. He had dark hair pulled into a tight bun on the back of his head, after the Trade Guild fashion, and he wore dark liner around his eyes. He smiled at Graythan and approached with a smooth, flowing gait. Ah, Graythan, how pleasant to see you here today, and in such lovely company. He had the lilting accent of Perone, but drug out his words. Tawara cringed at his unctuous tone. Ladies, may I present Aiden Elishbar, a journeyman of the Trade Guild, and assistant gladiatorial overseer in the training house of the capital city of Skaroth. Graythan indicated Tawara and Athandra. Aiden, you have the esteemed privilege of being in the audience of the royal princess-elect Tawara of House Umari, daughter of the baronship of the province of Avalonia, and her esteemed handmaid, tutor, and adviser, Athandra Koviat of Adamar. Aiden bowed to the two women, flourishing his robes as he bent in their direction. My dear ladies, I am humbled and delighted to be in your presence. Princess-elect, may I bid you a warm and most honorable welcome to Perome? If you have need of anything, I am your humble servant. Tawara nodded in Aiden's direction, offering a pleasant smile. Thank you, Master Elishbar. If I have any needs, I shall be sure to seek you out. As Aiden stood, Graythan caught his arm. Come, Aiden, sit with us. Your knowledge of gladiatorial training would be a welcome insight. This will be the Princess-elect's first encounter with the gladiatorial fighting. Aiden's eyes lit up, and some of the slow unctuousness left his voice. Indeed, really. The first time to see our gladiators. This will be a treat. He cast his gaze about, a look of speculation on his face, before returning his eyes to Graythan. I think I have a better recommendation. He stepped over beside Graythan and gestured toward the far side of the arena. The central dais, that is where I am to sit. I invite you as my guests. Master Narvash and Bertrand will welcome your company, so long as you are not buyers here to see the latest stock of gladiators for sale. There are plenty of seats and soft cushions, and the Master Bertrand is always sure to provide the most lavish of wine and refreshment. Graythan turned to Tawara with a wide grin on his face. My lady, seats on the arena floor, amid the spectacle. This is quite an opportunity. Tawara stood, a smile coming to her own face. I think I would rather enjoy that. She stepped forward, taking Aiden by the arm. If you will lead the way, Aiden, may I call you Aiden? Aiden smiled, and Graythan raised an eyebrow in Tawara's direction, offering his elbow to Athandra. Now, Aiden, when you say lavish wines, do you mean from the Western Confederation or drow vintages? Aiden laughed, telling her in great detail of the many selections available as he escorted her down the steps and across the arena floor to a raised dais covered by a gilt-fringed purple awning. As they took their seats, a procession of Alkari entered through the western gate. White-robed figures walked, with them carrying poles with numbers stenciled on placards set on their ends. Groups of Alkari and Paramis broke off from the procession and began to line the southern wall, the tall poles with the numbers placed behind each group. My lady, Aiden said to Tawara, the good masters have arrived to start the proceedings. Tawara followed Aiden's gaze to see two men approaching the dais. Both men had the skin color of honey fresh from the comb, and each had straight, midnight black hair pulled into a tight bun at the back of his head. They had green eyes rimmed with a heavy liner that fully covered the upper eyelids and swept like wings out onto their temples. Their cheeks were patterned with a scrollwork of tattoos, the black of the ink barely visible on their dark skin. One of the men was short and thin for a Paramis. He wore a neatly manicured mustache and a goatee that ended in an oiled point below his chin. He was adorned in gold and purple robes, the hems lined with jewel-studded scrollwork, lace spilling from every opening. His slippered feet left smooth prints in the dirt, and his robes swished as he crossed the arena. The other man was taller and impressively large. He wore similar robes that stretched over his bulk. A thick, heavily oiled beard, knotted with jewels, framed his plump cheeks. He moved with flowing grace that contrasted sharply with his corpulence. Aidan stood as they approached, bowing formally. Master Narvash, Master Bertrand, I hope all is prepared to your satisfaction. He straightened and gestured to Tawara. May I present to you Princess-elect Tawara of House Umari, daughter of the baronship of the province of Avalonia, and her esteemed handmaid, tutor, and adviser, Athan Dracoviat of Adamar, my guests for today's events. Tawara marveled at the change in his voice. The self-importance was still there, yet it was now coupled with a childlike pride, as though these were his parents, and he was showing off a favored prize. He turned to Tawara. My lady, may I present the masters of the Skarathi Training House and esteemed aldermen of the Alkari Trade Guild, Master Varshan Narvash and Elisar Bertrand. The smaller of the two men stepped forward, tisking at Aidan as he ascended the steps and bowed toward Tawara. The large man followed suit, bowing where he stood on the arena floor. My apologies, Princess-elect. It is we who should be introduced to you, the smaller man said, scowling at Aidan as he straightened. I am Varshan Narvash. I and my companion welcome you. We are most humbled and honored to be in your presence. Tawara rose, a bit surprised at the formality in Narvash's greeting. She inclined her head to him formally. Master Narvash, Master Bertrand, as a representative of House Umari, I accept your welcome. May joy and blessings be upon you. Narvash smiled at her equally formal reply, and visibly took on a more casual air. May I say, my lady, he said, stepping forward, I have known your father for many years. I spent many hours in his company, and appreciate his warmth and sincerity. Though we spend much time in negotiations, I always look upon our time together with fondness. Thank you for your kind words, Master Narvash. My father speaks fondly of you as well, though he frequently comments on the energy with which you negotiate. She smiled knowingly, and Bertrand let out a bark of laughter at the comment. Narvash returned the smile and waved his hand dismissively. Though dear Bertrand and I join you as businessmen rather than spectators, I believe you will quite enjoy the display of our wares. He smiled knowingly at her. I must take my position before the demonstrations begin, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts on my own Alkari when the events have concluded. I look forward to the demonstration, Master Narvash, Master Bertrand. They both nodded to her in return, then made their way to seats on the dais. Bertrand laying back in a chaise, stretching out his bulk in a pile of cushions. The clash of steel rang out, reverberating off the wooden walls and nearly empty stands of the arena. Tawara watched wide-eyed as the two warriors stepped away from their brief clash, sweat dripping onto the dirt of the arena floor as they slowly circled one another. They moved with a casual grace, as each flowed from ready form to ready form. The long swords they held floated and danced with their movements. The two Alkari were tall, both well over 6 feet. They shared the same elven features, ears that rose in tall points, overly large, slightly tilted eyes in shades of lavender. Their skin was a blue-tinged gray, mottled with dark freckles and muted shades of purple, and the darker grays. Their bodies were uncovered, save for soft leather shoes and short pants that reached partially down their thighs, held in place with leather cords around their waists. One man was young, his body lithe and strong, with lean muscles that flexed and rippled as he moved. His silver hair was long, pulled back in a braid that fell past his shoulders. The other warrior was clearly older, his body thicker with corded muscles that strained at the skin covering them. His body was crisscrossed with scars, and the tip of one of his pointy ears was missing. His head was shaved, except for a small silver topknot on its crown. On the floor of the arena, behind the old warrior, a third Alkari lay face down in the dirt. He wore the same topknot, and his unmoving body was adorned with scars similar to that of the older warrior still fighting. As their slow dance continued, the older Alkari struck. His movements were cat-like as he ducked low and stepped in to close the distance, his sword a blur. Where the older warrior was cat-like, the younger was a viper. One moment he was moving in time with the older man, the next his body contorted and spun, his sword deflecting the other warrior's blow. His follow-through ended the fight as he countered with 3 quick strikes in succession, his elbow met the older man's jaw, turning his head. Next, a leg sweep dropped him to one knee. Finally, a quick downward swing brought the sword of the blade into contact with the back of his opponent's now exposed neck. The blade stopped as it made contact, and both men paused, breathing heavily. "Ah, well done, very well done indeed," said Narvash, as his high-pitched, oily voice almost jovial. He clapped slowly as he approached the warriors, still frozen in their final position. Tuara let out a breath, as she had not realized she'd been holding. She clapped softly to herself, eyeing Aiden out of the corner of her eye as she did so. This was the 22nd fighter to demonstrate his skills today. After the first Alkari demonstration, Tuara had cheered, drawing the attention of the silent arena. She had been told the sequence of events before they started, but no one had told her not to clap. Before gladiators were considered fit for sale, each had to demonstrate their prowess in the arena in a series of 3 events. Each warrior would perform a type of floor show, highlighting their strength, agility, and skill in wielding the weapons with which they were most proficient. They would perform various acrobatics, followed by weapons forms, striking dummies, or targets to show precision and accuracy with their weapon of choice. The next 2 events were combative trials. The first was an unarmed defense against 2 opponents wielding red-painted dowels. The gladiator had to disarm each opponent while taking minimal strikes. Any strikes would be clearly seen by the red paint left behind. If a warrior took more than 3 strikes anywhere on his body, or if he took any strikes to his torso or head, his trial would be over, and he would be removed from the lineup to receive more training. For their final trial, each warrior must fight and clearly defeat 2 of his trainers. To add to the difficulty, the weapons used in this test were those with which the warrior was the least proficient. Aiden had pointed out that these were demonstrations, like selling cattle at an auction, not a performance. One didn't cheer when prime stock was displayed for sale. Well, the buyers and sellers might take this all in stride, but watching the level of expertise on display had kept Tuara on the edge of her seat the entire time. She cheered for each fighter, just quietly enough that no one on the other side of the arena could hear her. As Narvash approached the gladiators, 3 men in white robes moved swiftly from an entrance to the end of the arena to the 3rd Alkari lying in the dirt, quickly assessing him. 2 men whose coloring and dress matched that of Narvash, if not so lavish, both wearing flat conical hats, flanked him. One carried a stack of parchment, his long face and haughty air resembling that of a show horse, despite his gray hair. The other carried an open bottle and scroll-worked silver goblet, condensation beating on its surface. By contrast, his round face and painted eyes gave him the appearance of a child's toy doll. "Is he quite all right?" Narvash intoned, concern in his voice. One of the white-robed men stood and bowed to Narvash. "He is well, my liege. It was a clean blow. He is merely unconscious." With that pronouncement, the man produced a small vial from a pouch at his waist, uncorking it and waving it under the Alkari's nose. The downfighter began to stir. Narvash nodded and turned his attention to the 2 gladiators, still frozen in the final position of their battle. "I must say, Aldrin, that was a most impressive display. I am quite pleased," Narvash said. "You will please stand." The 2 Alkari rose from their positions, standing at attention and facing Narvash. "Well," said Narvash, waving his hands, his bejeweled fingers fluttering. "Smile, my pretties. Be happy. You have both done well." The 2 looked down at Narvash, adoration in their eyes. The older warrior grinned. The younger showed a shy half-smile. "There you are," said Narvash happily, slapping his hands together in front of his chest. "Now, I think we have given our audience enough time. Go to your positions and drink something." Without a word, the Alkari each gave a half-bow before striding to the edge of the arena. Narvash turned to face the small entourage. He reached for the goblet without looking at the man holding it as he spoke. "Now," he pronounced, a fierce gleam in his eye as he handed the goblet back, "let us see if we can truly leave an impression on our humble audience." Tuara watched Narvash intently, following his gaze as he looked across the arena to the 3 centermost covered areas in the stands. Each section shaded a household of people from the bright sun overhead. The buyers and their retinues of advisors, counselors, trainers, and overseers. The centermost section was where she, Athandra, and Graythan had been seated before being invited to the dais by Aiden. The vice-chairman not only owned the arena, but was also a particularly important buyer. Aiden had pointed out the other wealthy buyers from the realm seated strategically in the stands. They were all made comfortable. but the three in the center sections would only buy prime fighters, and they would pay handsomely. White-robed figures dotted the stands, some carrying trays of food or drink, others standing ready to see to any of the guests' needs. Tuara watched the buyers as Narvas crossed the dirt. She was no salesman, yet even she could see that the buyers were highly interested in what they had seen. Oldron was one of the most skilled who had been presented, and discussions in each tented section were still ongoing. Narvas smiled as he walked toward the purple-covered dais, pausing in front of Bertrand, who reclined on furs and soft burgundy pillows under the tent shade. Beside the rotund man lay a half-empty silver tray of various meats, breads, and fruits, their heavy aroma carrying on a gentle breeze. His green eyes sparkled, and he licked juices from his thick, multi-ringed fingers as he watched Narvas approach. "My dear Bertrand," Narvas said, grimacing, "I do not know how you can consume food with such spices in the heat of the day." "Ah," Bertrand replied jovially as he rubbed his middle, "but spices such as these are the flavor of life to me. The heat of the summer, the cold of the winter. Flavor is always in season, my friend." Narvas gave a bitter laugh. "They may offer flavor to you, but for me, spices like that would mean a night on the privy. A battle such as that I would only wish on my worst enemies." Bertrand's belly shook as he chuckled, rising and crossing the distance to stand next to Narvas. Tuara and Athondra shared a giggle as they watched the exchange. "What is your assessment?" Bertrand asked, brushing crumbs from his robes and rubbing his hand over his beard. "I believe we will do very well today," Narvas replied speculatively. "This is our finest crop of Alkari trainees in years, and our special friends over there have most definitely had their interest piqued. See how they continue to discuss many minutes after this last display. And none are aware that, as the saying goes, we have saved our best still to come," said Bertrand, giving his friend a knowing look. Narvas wrinkled his brow at his companion. "I don't believe that is how the saying goes." "Of course it is," said Bertrand. "We have not shown our best. It is still to be revealed. You see, it makes perfect sense." "No, I didn't say it made no sense," Narvas retorted. "I said that is not the saying." "It is the saying, it isn't the saying," Bertrand replied, shrugging and moving his hands up and down like a scale. "I am saying it, so that is good enough." "But that is not—" Narvas began, his voice rising, but was interrupted by an ahem from beside the dais. Narvas gave the horse-faced attendant with the parchment a sidelong glance, adjusting his already straight robes. The man simply stared at his documents as though he were oblivious to the discussion. Narvas closed his eyes and sighed before looking back at Bertrand. "I believe it is time to bring in our true best, my friend." Tuara had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing. The two were so casual, so, well, human. After the brief introductions, they seemed to forget that anyone else shared the dais with them. They bantered and prodded at each other, adding an unexpected comedic sideshow to the entire proceedings. Aidan had scowled at their tittering, but Narvas and Bertrand hadn't even seemed to notice. Together, the two men turned, stepping further onto the arena floor to face the buyers. Conversations were hushed as they approached the center of the arena. Some of those in the stands began to rise, ready to move to the next phase of the process, where they would inspect the warriors who had demonstrated their skill. Narvas raised his arms, his hands palm down, flapping slowly at the onlookers as he spoke. "My good friends, please remain seated. Yes, thank you, thank you." He dropped his arms, clasping his hands together at his waist, waiting for quiet once more before continuing. "I hope that you have enjoyed our display today. Some of you have traveled far to be here, and I trust you have not been disappointed by what we have to offer." Not unexpectedly, silence met his statements. "We invited each of you here today for a special purpose. I can say without hesitation that this is the finest crop of Alkari fighters that has ever been produced in the Skarath training house." Tuara scanned those seated in the arena, seeing impatience in some of the faces. "Are they not coming down to inspect?" Tuara whispered, quietly receiving a shrug from Athondra in answer. "My friends," Narvas continued, after his brief pause, "before the inspections begin, there is one more demonstration we wish you to see." With that, Bertrand turned to the east arena entrance, signaling two white-robed men. One of them disappeared through the entrance and returned quickly, followed by several Alkari trainers and overseers, a white-robed figure carrying a pole with the number 23 painted on the placard at its top. Last to enter the arena was another Alkari fighter. He was broad-shouldered and lean, towering over the other Alkari by nearly a hand. Like the other fighters, his long silver hair was tied back in a single braid. He flowed into the arena, a leopard amongst a group, as he stalked across the dirt. He paused with the retinue several paces from Narvash and Bertrand. "This, my friends, is a special treat for you," Narvash proclaimed boldly. "Quite honestly, this will be a special treat for us as well," he quipped, giddiness coloring his words. "Ahem," came Bertrand's quick reprimand. "Yes, well," continued Narvash, recovering quickly, "young Alandar here is a prodigy." Tuara scanned the faces of the arena. Some were dubious, others looked annoyed. "What is going on?" she asked Graythan, who merely shrugged in response. "This is not standard practice," came Aiden's reply to her question. "As Master Narvash has said, the buyers will be given a special treat today." Aiden's smile was knowing, and he tapped a meaty finger to his round nose as he quickly explained. "You see," he said instructively, "each buyer in the arena was given a list of fighters on display today, giving their name and particulars. To leave a fighter off the lists puts the buyer at a disadvantage." Tuara nodded her understanding as she turned her attention back to Bertrand, who had continued to address the disgruntled guests. "If you please, good friends, we must ask for your forgiveness for leaving this one warrior off your lists. If you will indulge me for a moment." The grumbles settled, but the meager apology was clearly not enough. "As you look around the arena, you will see that not all potential buyers are here to witness this event. Indeed, this is a relatively small gathering. Some of you will also remember receiving special exhortations to attend this event." Bertrand looked pointedly at the 3 buyers in the tented sections. An understanding seemed to pass between him and those in the stands, as annoyance gave way to various looks of curiosity. Bertrand nodded to himself knowingly and continued. "The small number here today is by design. The warrior you see before you has a very special lineage. He has also received special training and unique oversight. Had this information been included, word would have spread and many buyers would fill the arena, along with spectators vying to view his debut. For this reason, we have kept him a secret. We promise you, when you see his performance and know of his lineage, you will understand why he was not included." Whispers of speculation passed through the small groups scattered throughout the stands. The 3 buyers kept their faces smooth, the silence in their boxes revealing. Tuara's stomach danced. After 22 superb demonstrations, could this new fighter really be so amazing? She eyed the Alkari towering over his retinue, a few strands of silver hair rustling in the breeze, the only indication that this was not a statue. She felt her skin prickle in anticipation. "My good friends," Bertrand continued, "so as to keep your undivided attention, I will not yet reveal any more information about our young prodigy. Rather, we will allow him to demonstrate his prowess." Bertrand looked at each of the 3 special buyers in return, waited for their nods of assent, then directed the group around Alandar to take its place in the lineup at the west end of the arena. Narvash and Bertrand returned to their seats on the dais. As he sat, Narvash nodded to an attendant. The woman acknowledged the nod and raised a small hand bell from a pillow at her side. She gave it a quick shake, its cheerful tone carried through the arena. At the sound of the bell, 3 men entered through the east gate. Each wore a blue silk blouse tied at the waist and loose-fitting white silk trousers tucked into calf-high soft leather boots. Each hand held a half-pace-long, wrist-thick wooden dowel covered in bright red paint. There were some whispers in the stands as the 3 men ran to the center of the arena and arranged themselves in a triangle with 6 paces to a side. Alandar jogged into their midst, pivoting slowly. There was a hushed moment in the arena, all eyes on the large Alkari. The attack from Alandar's left came without warning. The lunge with a red-painted dowel set the other 2 attackers in motion. All 3 men swung furiously, the quick, calculated strikes. They moved in a rhythm, having obviously trained for this event, each attack attempting to play off the other to try to trap Alandar and deliver a disqualifying blow. But if Uldren had been a viper, Alandar was lightning. His blocks and counterstrikes were so fast that his body appeared to blur. 2 of the attackers were immediately flung across the arena, their bodies striking the ground hard. One skidded, leaving a pace-long trail in the loose dirt of the arena floor. The other rolled several times before coming to a stop. Neither moved, and both were lacking their dowels. The third man dove away from the mayhem, one of his dowels already lying in the dust. "By the gods!" came a voice from the stands, accompanied by gasps and scattered expletives. Tawara's gasp was no less audible, the thrill of what she had just witnessed causing her heart to race. She cast a quick glance around and found that she was not the only one on the edge of her seat. Athandra chewed nervously on a knuckle, staring wide-eyed at the spectacle, as if blinking might cause her to miss some crucial event. Graythan's head turned, and for a moment his eyes met Tawara's. She almost laughed, and couldn't help returning the excited grin that had sprung onto Graythan's face. On the arena floor, Alandar was nonchalant as he approached the remaining man. The fighter began to step forward, ready to make a move, but before he finished his step, Alandar was on him. The man's body spun and hit the ground with a loud thwack, a moment before his red-coated dowel. Tawara couldn't help herself. She was on her feet and shouted, "Yeah!" that escaped her lips, reverberating from the nearly silent arena. All eyes were on her, and she felt her face go red. Thinking quickly, she waved a hand in a flourish and gave a half bow to the onlookers before gracefully finding her seat. Scattered chuckles came from around the stands, and Tawara's embarrassment subsided. She had noticed several of the less wealthy buyers on their feet. She was not the only one caught up in the excitement of the moment. Alandar straightened, his body relaxed as he stood waiting for the next trial. There were 2 red marks on his body, one on his right forearm, the other on his left thigh. From his seat, Narvash let out an audible breath. "Only 2, Tawara heard him mutter. He was right. Even if a third mark had been accidental, Alandar would have failed. Still, to face 3 and come out with only 2 marks was amazing. Anxiety and giddiness roiled inside her. What must Narvash be feeling? He smiled pleasantly as he sipped from a goblet, yet Tawara suspected he was as nervous as she. As Alandar waited, the attendant's bell chimed again. Before the ringing ceased, 2 Alkari with shaved heads and top knots who had come in with Alandar moved across the arena floor. Each carried a blunted short spear. As one of the men approached, he tossed a second spear to Alandar, who caught it effortlessly and crouched. There were no jeers or taunts, no demonstrations or preamble. The 2 trainers moved to either side of Alandar and attacked. They moved in measured time. Alandar's weapon was a blur, and the clack of deflected strikes by the spear shaft made a constant clatter that echoed throughout the arena. Amid the cacophony came an occasional higher-pitched thwack, accompanied by grunts from both Alandar and his trainers. As quickly as it had begun, the trial was over. There was silence as all eyes stared at Alandar and the 2 Alkari who lay at his feet in the center of the arena. Tawara could hear her own heart beating, her breathing quick with excitement. "My friends," proclaimed Narvash from his dais, breaking the spell, "you have witnessed Alandar's spectacular trial. I hope you have found him sufficiently impressive." His head swiveled as he scanned the buyers. Was he disappointed that there were no applause? Tawara certainly wanted to cheer, but kept herself in check this time. "However," he continued, "this display is not yet over. Lest anyone claim this has been a token showing, or that Alandar is less than he seems, we will have one more trial." Dun, dun, dun. So, getting introduced to some new characters, trying to think back, because we've rewritten so many things, even though we're reading through the book, we're still editing book 2. Is this the first we actually see of the Alkari?
Yes, this is the first time we actually see them.
So, you've now met the Alkari. So originally, this chapter and the next chapter were all one chapter, but it was like 9,500 words.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we want to introduce Alandar. We got to introduce the gladiators and introduce like what happens with them, who they are, etc. And we're like, we need to break this up and need to condense this down a little bit.
Actually, originally we had 2 chapters. One was a whole nother thing.
Yeah, there were. It was 2 chapters. These 2 chapters were their own chapter, and then there was a whole nother chapter
that we've cropped out for later use because it was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it gives some good insight into the customs and the people and everything like that. But when we read through it, we're like, well, we don't need it here. Right now, we need to introduce, we need a Narvash and Bertrand to come in. We want to introduce Alandar. We need to introduce the Alkari. But the other piece we needed, we're like, we'll save it. We'll bring it back in. So there'll be another chapter that we've already written that'll come up later. But so next chapter, maybe we'll see where it goes. But hopefully you like the introduction, the introduction to our Alkari, our gladiatorial events, gladiatorial trials. And as Narvash said, there's one more trial that he's got to go through. So join us next time and you'll get to hear about that. For now, we're going to jump over and we're going to have a little roundtable discussion with Lynn Combs and Miller Thomas. So we'll see you right there. Well, we have two guests with us today. They have both been on with us before and recently. But we wanted to get together, do a little roundtable, have some more discussion all together because we're cool like that.
Of course.
Hey, the more content, the better.
Yes. So we've got Lynn Combs with us, and where can people find you?
LynnCombs.com.
Okay, so LynnCombs.com, and we talked to you last time. We were talking about progress on your book.
Yes.
And your children's book that you've got coming out. Still looking sometime into the year, hopefully?
Yep. Beginning of the year. We're working on it, getting closer every day.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. And it is, what's the...
Duncan the Dragon Finds His Fire.
Duncan the Dragon Finds His Fire.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll be looking for that. And when we get some updates, put those up on the website.
Definitely let you know. Yep.
Okay. Very cool.
Yep.
And on the other side, we have Miller Thomas. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Very good. And last time we were kind of in a holding pattern.
Still maintaining holding pattern.
How's that holding pattern going?
Still maintaining. Just trying to get, whenever I get the time, and try to add a little bit, put a few words on paper, but it's a little slow right now, but still working on it.
Still going. Still plugging away.
Yes.
So if anybody out there knows any millionaires that want to sponsor a few writers and turn them into full-time authors,
hey,
send them our way, right?
Right.
So we had a there was an idea kind of floating around that Jared actually presented that we wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about. Jared, what was your discussion idea?
The use of humor in a serious story.
So when you think of that, Jared, what's like what does that mean to you?
Well, there's a lot of stories out there that are serious, like thrillers or even fantasy, and where it's a very serious story. It's very keep that suspense level up, keep the tension up, But like in our work, we try to break that up with little bits of humor here and there.
Yeah.
And, so I guess how do you do that? When is it appropriate? Is there sometime it's not appropriate?
Yeah. Does it change the dynamic of the story?
Yeah.
Or could it potentially turn people away? So while you were saying that, have either of you seen like the movie Seven with Morgan Freeman and Brad
I
Pitt?
haven't. Yeah.
So what's something along the lines of the movie? I thought of that because I'm like, if you want to talk about a serious movie, or let's say, let's go a little bit different direction. How about Schindler's List?
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty serious movie.
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Do they really have any humor?
Well, and that's the point I'm getting at is I can't think of anything like lighthearted and humorous at all
No.
in Schindler's List.
Even the color. I mean,
Yeah.
even it's like this is about as depressing as you can make it, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. No, and I don't think it would be appropriate in that movie, too. I mean, not to get across what they wanted to get across, with that.
But like, I'm trying to think. If you were going to do something like that, what kind of humor could you even interject that people wouldn't immediately be like, "What?"
So it's interesting because it's like, how are you going to approach the story? Because I can just think of what I know of history of Holocaust, that like the Treblinka was an extermination camp, but they talk about how that guy who ran that camp, he'd exterminate 8,000, between his breakfast, and then he'd stop and have lunch. He had his family that lived right there at the camp. And then here's another 8,000, and then he'd have his dinner, and maybe they'd have some on, it's like, just, it's weird, and just is so shocking to think of that these weren't, in that way, that they're not, they're human beings.
Yeah.
And they weren't, because that's what's interesting, is monsters in a way is a way that people can process evil in a way that is remote. This, as long as, I've never seen a werewolf in person, so I'm safe, but I can read a story about them, and it's, but when it comes to actual, like, monstrous things that people have done, it's like, you don't really know, that's the fantasy part of it. But like in that, you could have, hey, they're joking around at their dinner, you know what I mean? And it's like, that would portray, in a way, it's almost like it would add to maybe even the seriousness or the horror of it, in a way, because it's like they don't think anything of all these horrible things that they're doing. It's just a job to them.
Yeah.
It's all about the deity of evil. It's like, it's just a job, just a thing to do.
But it also points out that they're human.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just like you and I. They go to work, they do their job, they come home. But, I mean, granted, their job is a horrific job, but, and I'm sure we all feel about a job that way, not in the same respect, definitely.
See, like, this would be, like, when you say not as horrific, have you tried writing, dealing with Oracle databases? Terrible.
Yeah.
Horrific. Horrendous.
Yeah.
Nobody should do that.
But definitely more acceptable on a human level, you know. But yeah, I could see that, something like that would definitely humanize them. And a lot of time in stories, the big bad or the bad guy is trying, I mean, their motives overall are trying to make things better. They think they're going about a good thing.
Yeah, the redeemable villain.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're trying to make things better, and that's kind of my villain. He thinks he's doing what he's doing to make things better, to fix tragedies in his life, to do these things and everything. And so, I don't know how much redemption would be in.
I was thinking, though, from a humor perspective, like writing a story. So Jared and I have a fantasy series. Mm-hmm. The humor that is in there is meant to be, one, get to know the characters, and two, humor for humor's sake. Whereas, let's say, like you said, this person who runs an execution camp. And then they go home at night and they're joking around the table and they tell some funny jokes. Well, the humor that's in there would be to portray the human side of these bad people, not for the sake of just having humor.
Yeah.
Or to make to lighten the mood of a very serious thing.
Or even, it is interesting with a person, like, dealing with it. Because that's the thing that I think and that's why it would probably be very controversial, because there's some people who do not want to deal with complex situations. Like with that, because humor is disarming.
Yeah.
When you laugh at someone, it's like, you feel like you're accepting them, but it's like in that kind of story, I can't accept that. That's horrible. That,
Yeah.
and that's even in another sense. There was it's actually an anime that I watched here recently, and they're talking about like fighting these demons. Well, these demons, they have no love. They're psychopathic, but yet they can portray things and show like one. It was a child that was a demon, and they had wiped out this whole colony of these demons. But this one is like, it says, "Mommy, mommy," it says this,
Yeah.
and so they're like, "Oh, that don't kill it because it clearly is wanting its mother, and it's just surely we can redeem it somehow." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Well, then later on. And it's just playing with his family and like, acting like just a normal kid. Well, then they come and it's killed the dad. It's burned down the house, and it's here with, what was it? With the daughter, and they go to it and they're like, "Why would you do this horrible thing?" It's like, well, she was sad because she was missing. She didn't have a mom, so now she can have a mom and dad, another family or something like that. But anyway, so then they're like, "You're a horrible monster," and so they're going to kill it. It's like, "Mommy," and then they shoot it anyway. And then they're like, "Why did you say mommy?" It's like, "Well, when I said mommy, the humans didn't hurt me."
Yeah.
So it's like it was portraying an emotion it didn't possess, which is really.
Yeah.
It's like when that hit like a certain way, it's like that is so deep
Yeah.
of that we, like even, humanity, when we see clouds, oh, that's a giant, that's a dragon, that's a this or that. We project what we think onto something else. Well, we do that the same with emotions.
Yeah.
And in that was very like, wow, that really hits you because you have an idea of the world, and things that portray emotion have emotion, but yet if it was so, conniving, so to speak, and it has no emotion and it just is a killing machine, but yet, and you can use humor in that way too. That's disarming. It tells a monster that tells jokes. I mean, you go to the Joker. I mean, very. I mean, and the actual Joker, in like comics, he's funny. He tells funny jokes, but it's like, it's like, man.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking about, it's interesting, shifting into a little bit different realm, but comparative to what we're talking about is this. I think it's difficult from a human perspective. Two different things. One, that, well, I feel emotion, I feel these feelings, so everybody else feels them. And it's difficult to not think that everybody else feels the way that you feel. Mm-hmm. And then, like, one of the, I don't know if danger isn't the right word, but an interesting perspective on that take is that, look at Disney movies, where in Disney movies like Lady and the Tramp, or Cinderella, you have these little mice, or you have the dog, or you have, there's the cats that are unfeeling and they're going to go get milk, but Lady loves her human, and all these different things. Or Fox and the Hound, there's the owl that's going to take care of him, and that you feel for this little worm, and the worm shows emotion. But in reality, within nature, like people don't realize. So Wilbur in Charlotte and the Web, or Charlotte's Web, like, if you've been around pigs, like a sow will have a litter or whatever it is of piglets.
Yeah.
And that sow, right after the piglets are born, might, she'll smell them and everything, recognize them, and instinct kick in, and then she lets them nurse and raises them. Or she might kill and eat all of the piglets that she just had.
Yeah.
And that might happen with a cow.
Yeah.
A deer might have a fawn and then turn around and be like, what's this? And be scared of it and stomp it to death.
Yeah.
Like, that's, cats will do that. Dogs will do that. Pigs will do that. Like, everything that isn't a human, every animal on the planet that is not a human will potentially, literally, give birth and then turn around and kill the thing that elephants, whales, dolphins, sharks, it doesn't matter what it is.
I mean, even humans do it to an extent. I mean, there's cases of it. You know, where like
So
you have
now-
your baby
so
and you
now
put it
take-
in a dumpster. I mean, how? What?
Now take that human portion out of it, where we have reason, logic, and emotional connections. Whereas from an animal perspective, people don't like, even dogs that love their humans. We say love, but it's really connection over time, familiarity, and
Trust.
bred traits for, breeding in traits into animals that it is now instinct.
But also as writers, we want that connection.
Right.
Even with our animals and other things
Yeah.
in our books, because we want our readers to be able to relate.
Yeah.
We anthropomorphize
Yeah.
our whatever our characters are to
Well,
have
really-
human,
Yeah.
human interaction, human feelings. When they wouldn't really.
We'll personify inanimate objects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I love. If you guys haven't seen it, we'll watch it together after
Okay.
this episode. But I'm going to tell you what happened for the benefit of anybody. Go look up IKEA lamp commercial.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
If
awesome.
you have not seen the IKEA lamp commercial,
no.
it starts off this lamp, a little red lamp on a desk. And you see a person's hands reach over and unplug the lamp. And then a box gets set on the curb with garbage, and the little lamp gets set on the curb next to the box. And the sad music's playing. And then it shows the person's hand taking out a new lamp. And it shows this little lamp down on the curb. And from the lamp's perspective, the window is visible where this other desk lamp is shining down.
Oh, no.
And then it starts to rain.
Oh,
And the sad music is playing. And then the person in the wind through the window, they reach over and they click the lamp off, and then they touch it affectionately before they walk out of the room. And then you pull back a little bit from the little red lamp that's getting rained on, and a person comes walking into view, and they're walking in the rain, and it's this awkward looking guy, and he turns and looks at the camera and he says, "Many of you feel sad for this lamp. You're crazy. I have no feelings." and the other one is much better. And then it's like, IKEA, go buy a new one. And I'm like, exactly. This isn't the brave little toaster. The toaster doesn't have feelings.
But it is. I mean, if our readers can't relate or feel emotion for, like that little lamp, they're not going to get into your books.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But we
So-
do that. I mean, how many
Oh,
books
yeah.
are there with like swords? That it
Yeah.
is the sword and people are connected to the sword, or, whatever it is. And just, should we be good caretakers? Should we be good stewards? Should we not put kittens in a bag and throw them in the
Yeah.
river?
Yeah.
No, don't do that. That's a bad thing to do. However,
It's like you never kill an animal in your book.
Yeah. but again,
It's the cardinal rule.
from an emotional perspective,
Yeah.
are there connections, maybe, among some animals that go a little bit deeper than instinct?
Yeah.
A little bit. Like they've shown that there are certain animals that they might be able to sense stuff, but like almost everything that we observe, it's difficult to comprehend, but as humans, there isn't anything else that we know in the observable universe that we're aware of that can build an emotional, actual attachment. The closest thing I can think of, the two things I can think of is elephants appear to have, but again, a mother elephant might give birth to her calf and then turn around and stomp it to death
Yeah.
and not think anything about it whatsoever.
Well, you kind of see
Or-
it in eagles too.
Or like a crow,
Yeah.
crows will be like, that guy threw a rock at us. I hate him, and poop on his car. And then all the other crows will be like, yes, we all hate that guy. We all poop on his car. You know? But again, even that, there's a level of intelligence there, but we haven't been able to show anything.
Yeah.
The personification that we give to everything is built into our natures.
Yeah.
But that personification, those connections, don't actually exist anywhere in nature outside of us.
That'd be something interesting itself. So it makes sense, like from a animal perspective, like the runt. You don't like the runt. You know,
Yeah.
the runt is weaker, is hurting the gene pool, is all these things. But yet
The whole packet.
yeah.
risk.
And so we are like, oh, the runt, redeems itself somehow, But I wonder, just think about when talking about like, also we have level of cuteness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it would be like we watch Alien, kill all the aliens out there, but if they were puppies, it's like, it's like there must have been some other way,
Yeah.
and
Now there's a story.
Funny aliens.
So we have Alien Prometheus and all the stuff where it covers like thousands of years.
Yeah.
What if the alien from Aliens evolved to look? They look like puppies. They still, implant this thing in your stomach, and when it comes out, it's not like
it's a puppy.
Yeah.
It's like, or like you said,
Yeah.
mommy.
Yeah.
And then what would be the reaction? Take care of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Because
cute.
that's what
Love it.
it's like. Well, I know it killed them, but we should, yeah,
Sweet and
yeah.
innocent and helpless and
It
yeah.
just made me think of there's a Simpsons episode where they have a gremlin, and the gremlin is on the bus, and nobody believes. But it's a play on the Twilight Zone when he's on the airplane and the thing's out on the wing and it's hacking the, and he's like, "There's a thing on the thing on the wing." Well, Bart's going through all of this, and it's a gremlin, and the gremlin is like slashing one of the tires and pulling lug nuts off and stuff while they're driving down the road on the school bus. Well, then they get to the end, and the bus driver's like gets off and is like, "Oh man, look at all this torn," but nobody believed Bart. But then they have this other little thing where Ned Flanders comes along, and he finds the little gremlin that got tumbled down the road, and he picks it up, and he swallows. He's like, "Oh, aren't you just the little cutest, doodly doodly?" And then a claw comes up and is like, and he's like, "Oh, you just tried to scratch my eyes out. That's so cute." And I'm like, "That's what we do. That's like whatever instinct humans. Oh, it's so cute. Yeah, but it spits acid.
Yeah.
Like it literally wants to eat you, but it's so cute." How many people would be like, are like, I know that bear will let me pet it.
Yeah.
No.
And then you wonder, that's one of the things, like you wonder where in human experience that happened. Because then it's like there's people, again, like what you're talking about, agriculture, think about things completely different. Also like Amish, I don't know how many times have you heard about that, puppy mills and how they abuse their animals. Like they're working, they look at them like a working animal, or like
Or just it's a tool.
the governor of I think it was South Dakota, and about her bird dog that got free and shot it, and they're like, oh, this puppy, and this and that. It's like it's a working, the way they look at it, it's a working dog, and it wasn't doing what it's supposed to do, and it was in fact, from what my understanding, was threatening chickens, which is livestock, somebody's livelihood. There's a completely different thought. Maybe that's even not necessarily humans. Maybe that's our modern society, because now there was the pets and various things, but that's, in a way, you think about it, it's like that's a luxury. There's a time where this animal has a purpose. This cat has a purpose to eat the mice. That's why we have a cat.
The horse pulls
No,
the
no,
plow.
we have
Cat.
cats because they're smart SOBs.
Yeah.
They walked up to the campfire one day and they realized, if I sound meow like a baby crying, they'll give me food.
Yeah.
And maybe it started of, well, I don't got enough bullets or whatever. I don't feel like killing it. I guess I'll let it just hang around, and then it warms you up. I guess I don't know.
Well, circling all the way back to
Humor.
I was thinking about like the Schindler's List thing, and you're talking about the Holocaust, but look at sketches. There's comedy sketches where Jared, I don't remember. You might know I don't remember if it was a Monty Python sketch or a different sketch where the guy's like, "I've been thinking, are we the baddies?" And
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember.
because that was Nazi soldiers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, portrayed the Nazi soldiers, and they're like, "Are we the baddies?" And it's this whole comedy thing, and you're like, "Yeah, but what you're talking about is literally these soldiers that were, killing people, sending them to concentration camps, and executing people." Like, could you mix like that's making light of the whole situation, and spinning it on its head for humor's sake? If you tried to fit something like that into Schindler's List, what happens to that story?
Yeah. I don't think it would work for humor's sake. Now, on the other hand, if you show, say, children or a family in that movie that find a moment of lightness and a little bit of humor, then you're showing the humanity that's being, destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think it could work then.
Of course, that being said, you've heard that, like slasher movies, there's certain people, if you go there, that is a comedy to them, as funny as it can be. Did you see where his head flew? You see how far that? I mean, it's like, there's the very dark humor. This is the greatest comedy I've ever seen. It's like, whoa.
The Evil Dead, the entire Evil Dead series, with Ash, and then the TV show that came out of it, Ash versus the Evil Dead. I'm like, it's literally. They opened a book and demons came out of, he gets his hand cut off and puts a chainsaw in its place.
Yeah.
But then again, as writers, okay, we want that tension. We want to build that tension, but we've got to have those relief moments a little bit. And I think that's where humor comes in. It's in the middle of the tension and you're still building, but you have the up and then a little bit of a drop, and then the up and a little bit of a drop. And
But
I mean, it helps.
But that's where, again, like Schindler's List or Seven, So Seven is Morgan Freeman is a detective who's about to retire, and he's brought in his replacement, who's an experienced detective, but not to this area, and it's Brad Pitt. And the last case that comes up is they just start discovering these murders. And then they piece it together. And Seven is each murder has a theme of one of the 7 deadly sins. Oh. And it's very serious, very, and Kevin Spacey is the bad guy, the antagonist in the movie. Like, I can't think of a funny, quirky, anything moment in that movie at all. I'm trying to think from a book story perspective if there are any books I've read. Well, the book, oh gosh dang it, Ordinary Men. It's the 104th Polish Police Division, where it's a psychological study into using the journals and stuff like that of the guys who, like, they were just ordinary men that lived in Poland, and then they were like, you're going to be the police force in Poland. And the psychology that happened, because it was like around like 2,500 men, and how they changed over time to where some of them still kept writing in their journals about how they didn't like what they were doing, but they went beyond just police force and exterminate the bad people, the people we disagree with, who we sent to you. And it became like they became brutal, torturous, murderous people. And it's called ordinary men because it's the psychological study of, if you just take ordinary men and put them in this situation, how long does it take before they become...
They lose their humanity,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And even, like you were saying, like people that just doing their job. I'm just doing my job. And Jared, we've looked at like, was it IBM at the time that they were, no, who was it? A competent, they were talking about making things more efficient. And they're like, the product doesn't handle this well, doesn't handle this type of transport well, and the product they're talking about are Jews on trains and thrown into the backs of trucks and stuff like that. And the end result of getting them out. And there's documents of their communication where they're doing research and they're just saying the product,
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, ordinary men, of course, and Schindler's List, are based on journals and stuff like that. So it would be difficult to take liberties with that and throw humor in. But
Yeah.
It was IBM.
I was going to say, I thought it was IBM that were doing studies on like efficiency studies and the product that comes out, that is delivered. I'm like, they didn't even call them people. They didn't say the Jews. They didn't say the gypsies. It was the product.
Yeah. Well, that's almost like when I was finishing my degree, which is in psychology, is the thought of taking a brand new infant. Of course, it's a totally unethical thing and would probably never be done by anybody. But taking an infant and raising them to believe right is wrong and wrong is right. Totally reverse everything. What kind of product would you get out of that?
Yeah.
So...
And so let's say you were writing a story about that.
Yeah.
I could see it being kind of macabre and having some dark humor in that book.
But
there's a book that I've read that it was a really fun book to read and funny. I thought there were going to be more, but I haven't seen more. I haven't seen more of them come out yet, which is frequently the case.
That's hard when you find something you like, and then.
But it's this guy who has a baby. I don't know, 8 months old. It's a little girl, and she's still stroller age.
Yeah.
And somehow, like, death is supposed to pass. Like, death isn't the same person all the time, and whoever death is passes their powers on to whoever's supposed to be next. They were supposed to pass it on to one person. They accidentally passed it on to the baby.
Oh, goodness.
So it's a living baby that the dad realizes has to be like, no, don't.
Yeah.
Because the baby is just a baby.
They can't control.
And it'll be like, and say some, like, point at somebody. And then that person just dies. And he's like, no, you can't. No, baby, you can't. I got to keep this baby away from people.
Goodness.
But it's my daughter, and she's a little baby,
Oh, goodness.
So it's really funny.
Yeah.
But it's dealing with a baby
very serious.
that's death.
Oh, goodness.
But I don't know interjecting humor like that into other.
Talking about Schindler's List, and I don't know if you saw it, but Xavier Pocaine did his story and showed Hitler as a young child.
Yeah,
remember
we read
that?
Through that.
And it was basically all these people, the thought, what if someone went and killed Hitler as a baby, and, would it have happened and everything? But so he had these people time traveling back to kill Hitler, but none of them could bring themselves to do it. Even some Jews who suffered under his hand and everything. And it almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they basically tortured this kid, and it showed the Star of David that was there, and everything, and so all of these things are kind of put into this child's mind.
It was like
Kinda,
it was like a 12 Monkeys type thing, only with Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, how could he not grow up to be the man he was?
Yeah.
So,
and he even said, he's like,
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to
share
this just because,
Sorry.
Well, no.
Yeah, I just shared his story.
No, it's, but no,
know.
it's very, it's, these are the kind of interesting things that we as writers, because maybe we're a little crazy.
Yeah. I think it helps.
Well, along those lines, so my brother Caleb will text me ideas. Caleb's been on a couple episodes. We need to get him back on here again, but
Yeah.
we'll get Jared. We should get that scheduled.
All right.
Get that on the books.
Anyway, he'll be like, I'm never going to write stories, so if I just have ideas, I'm just going to send them to you.
Yeah.
Well, and along with that comes random thoughts, and one of them was, people will say, oh, if you could go back in time, why doesn't somebody go back in time and just kill Hitler when he's a little kid?
Yeah.
And so Caleb had asked the question. He's like, I hear people say that all the time. Go back in time, find Hitler when he was younger, before he became this leader, and just kill him. And he's like, has anybody, I've never heard anybody say, what if I went back in time and found Hitler as a little kid and then made sure I loved him and raised him and made him really nice and loved Jewish people and all the other people too? What if you just did that?
Yeah.
Like, that might be a little bit harder, but I've never heard anybody say,
True.
I'm willing to try that.
Yeah.
It's also, it is very interesting because, speaking of that, because ironically, at least seems like Western culture, Nazism and Hitler is evil. Mm-hmm. He's how we categorize, or that's absolute evil is that.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how it's almost like a shared idea that if you say that, and if you want to refer to somebody as being terrible, Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Immediately call him a Hitler. But yet even, and not saying I'm some, historian on it, but doing some like research and about World War One, it's like Hitler would have never rose to power if it wasn't for World War One, and it wasn't for what happened, for Germany being cut in half as they saw, with Poland being created and all this stuff. It's like he was just a strong figure that galvanized a lot of these ideas, and just made it where, again, it was a country that had been decimated, and people were starving, and they needed, he was just a leader that brought them together, and just that idea, so from their perspective, again, it's like, well, they started, again, it's where you had for World War One, there had been a period of general peace, but all these countries had built modern militaries. And so pretty much it was a powder keg waiting for a match. So when you got something, if you're a czar or whatever you might be, well, what's it like seeing them on the battlefield? I've read the stories, of Napoleonic Wars and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's just there's a certain thing that seems to be within humanity of destruction.
Yeah.
And there's a cathartic way, I suppose. Like now we have video games. People are like, well, video games make people violent. It's like, maybe they're letting the violence out generally.
Yeah.
And that's they're again, fantasy. You can live a fantasy, when you read it or watch a movie or something. And that's in some ways, if it's done, I think, well, it gives you here's what happens. Follow it correctly. Not bad things, that's the whole thing. Good versus evil, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, that's if maybe you're like, I can't stand that guy over there or whatever. It's like, well, what happens if I go down the bad path? That I do something bad to him. Well, that was the story, right? Well, you do something bad to him, something bad happens to you. You better not do that.
Yeah.
So many things, scenarios. Well, that's the thing, they're to probably bring it back, I think. I went down a rabbit hole. But with Hitler, that Hitler didn't see himself as being evil.
No.
And the people who followed him, They saw themselves, this is probably the answer is, to make a perfect world, you have to do unspeakable things. And that's the problem when it comes to anybody who says, hey, I can sort this all out. You just need to have a pile of bodies, and in the end, you're probably going to be on top of the pile.
Yeah.
That's the thing of, we as humanity, we have our flaws, and we can't perfect them outside.
Yeah.
We can't make that person do the thing that we want them to do. So we got to go the slow way, which is convince them maybe, but it's never going to be perfect for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so even if you have a group of people that, well, everything will be fine if that guy stops doing that and that guy stops doing that, well, how do you get them to stop it?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
yeah,
You either persuade people and let them have their liberty, and you work through persuasion, or you pull out guns and try and hope your guns are bigger than theirs to try to make them do what you want.
or you do like what you mentioned, you take children
Yeah.
and maybe you program them. But that's what's interesting. That's been done. I mean, Brave New World.
Yeah.
What was that? It isn't Hunger Games. What's the other one? Divergent.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Some of these that are like, well, we're trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
But that they have all this control, and that was just a big experiment. And it's like, you have all this control, but yet, again, people, now, you can have a group of people who act this way with this certain stimulus, but there's always outliers. There's always people that do things differently. And so that's where your problem is. And like what you talked about with your book, with Magic with Control, it's like, now we have magic, now we need to have control of it, because if we don't have a world that we have control over and people are just randomly doing things, it freaks that kind of person out, the obsessive compulsive person who wants to have power under control and under their control.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what it comes down to is people who think, well, I know what's best for you, and I know what's best for you. And the only way to make the world right is if you do what I know is best.
But do you know all the facts?
Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. What I know is best.
Yeah.
And the only way, it's too much work to persuade. So the best way I can enforce what I know is best is to convince people that are already in a like-minded way that I am, and then convince them that it is actually me who knows best, and then convince them all that they all need to take the guns or whatever armaments and go force all the people who don't think we know best, convince them at gunpoint that yes, we actually do know best.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what, when you started to say earlier, regardless of the world in which Hitler rose from, what if there'd been a way for him to convince everybody to love puppies instead of hating Jews?
Yeah.
Well, that was it.
We need camps to take care of puppies.
Yeah.
And we all need to come together and do this.
Yeah.
That's also interesting, I think, and that's why like freedom of speech is so important in our country, is because it gives you the opportunity to see perspective. Because, like with that, whenever they talk about Jews, it's because, well, not every Jew, but there were a lot of very rich Jewish bankers, very rich people that were of Jewish descent. They had power. And so for you to gain power, you have to overthrow the power before.
Or control it.
Yes. And so that's when you see there's all over, when you're on the internet, there's people like, because all these Jews and this and that, there's very anti-Semitic stuff. But then at the same time, you have to see that, yes, there was involvement in financial institutions, various things. And was that always good? No, because every human aspect.
Humans are human.
Humans are human. And, you can go the Bible, it's like Jesus was Jewish, but yet who was his greatest adversaries? They're Jews, but who are the apostles? They're Jews.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's the thing. It goes back to humans have behaved this way ever since, apparently, ever since fall.
Beginning of time.
Yeah. But And that's the other thing is for you to be my friend, it's the thing that, hey, can't we all be friends? No, because for you to be my best friend, you can't be their best friend. And so I'm going to try all this subterfuge and try to pull you away.
They're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah, because it builds more for me. That's the personal aspect of whatever that villainy and how it just mushrooms onto a person that, oh, this worked, so now I'll try it over here, and there you go. I mean, they're like what you're talking about. It's like, that's perfect villain. See, you've seen the story. I've seen this story how many times? You know.
Yeah.
Well, it even goes down even to the rom-coms and that kind of stuff. If they would just stop and talk to each other, there would be no, I mean, it would all be solved. But then again, you wouldn't have a story, you know, you wouldn't have the tension, the other issues and everything else. I mean, so, I mean, in a way we need it, but.
And how many times, that's what's funny. Yes, 90, we'll say 95, 96 times out of 100, they do.
Yeah.
And that's literally, hey, there's my parents. Hey, there's, you know, they actually could communicate. It's like, but what's interesting, what do you have the gossip about? You know, it's like, you don't want to hear gossip about, oh, this modern, you know, mundane thing that, the dog was hungry and they fed it, you know. It's like, no, they're like, kick the dog and they did, you know, and break something, you know. It's like, dysfunction. Dysfunction is entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it is interesting, though, to think about, you read cozy mysteries.
Yeah.
And take the cozy mystery genre, where frequently in cozy mysteries there will be humor and comedy.
Yes, yeah.
And it's not the mystery whodunnit suspense. It's not reading the book Kiss the Girls. I don't know if you've read or heard of that. Like, it's these serial killer spree killing college students. And I'm like, well, you could have a cozy mystery that the premise of the cozy mystery is these sociopaths or psychopaths or whatever that are killing, that are luring away and then killing and, you know, kidnapping, torturing, holding hostage for long periods of time, and then eventually killing college girls.
Yeah.
Well, you could have a cozy mystery that is that exact same thing, but rather than being the detective and the gore and the gruesomeness and and all this mental anguish and the trauma and everything he's experienced, you know, these people and the families
that could be
and
a
all
whole
this goes
podcast right there. It's
Yeah.
cozy mysteries.
But instead, it's this person's, they read this thing in the library and they went and this funny thing happened and they tripped and they fell down and their coffee spilled and all that.
Well,
you know,
there is some of it, but it's just mostly the gore, the sex, the other things are all done off camera.
Yeah, but,
you know, you don't get into them.
But the point is, the premise of the story is this person is trying to find sociopathic killers who kidnap, hold hostage, or hold, torture, and then kill college girls.
Yeah.
That's Kiss the Girls. That's, you know, they made the movie again, another Morgan Freeman movie.
I'm gonna watch more Morgan Freeman movies.
So they made it into a movie, but it's a book series, and it's like suspense, murder, thriller, suspense.
Yeah.
Well, take the dark side and emotional side out of it, and put a lighthearted character who probably isn't the detective, but is like playing detective, like Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's Angela Lansbury, and there's all these funny, quirky little things that happened. The whole time it's murder!
Yeah.
The whole time! Murder after murder after murder after murder!
Like Fargo.
Yeah. What? Yeah, so Fargo is a great example. I haven't watched the series, but the movie. The movie Fargo is dark, suspense, thriller, murder, mayhem, told from this Minnesotan, you know, funny, quirky Minnesota with all these funny, weird, quirky, funny stuff in it. And you're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, So
Well, you got to figure most of those crime shows, the CSIs, the NCISs, a lot of those, you get some humor in every episode almost.
Yeah.
And but again, it's murder. It's a very dark subject that we make light of, and one of that does that come to desensitizing the public, and not think so badly of it,
yeah, yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider.
As a cozy
when
mystery writer, I'm
Yeah.
adding to the problem.
but yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it is really
Yeah.
movies that we watch, stories that we read. Where literally there are people that'll be like, well, I don't really like deep suspense. It gets my heart racing and everything.
hardcore,
I don't
yeah.
like watching stuff about murder. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want to watch? How about Deadpool?
Yeah.
Well, it's comedy.
Yeah.
Well, people get murdered all over the place
Yeah.
and burned alive and whatever. Or
Yeah.
something along the lines of Fargo, where it's literally the subject matter that you're dealing with is, to think about that in real life, you're like, oh, this is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible. But it's told from a comic, that are we the baddies?
Mm-hmm.
You laugh at it and you're like, oh, it's funny and everything. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. Did anybody ever say that?
Yeah.
Was there ever a guard who turned to the other guard in the tower and been like, hey, should we be doing this? They're trying to climb over the fence. We've been starving them and making them work. And they climb over the fence. Like, they didn't do anything. They didn't break any laws. They just existed.
Yeah.
So we put them to work in here and we starved them while they work. When they go to climb over the fence, my job is to
Kill them.
open fire with this machine gun when they climb over the fence. Should I be doing that?
Yeah.
Are we the bad guys?
Shoot, if you really want to go down there, it's like maybe they felt like they were their saviors. It's like, here I
Putting
can
them
offer
out
you
of their
death.
misery.
Death. You've been suffering. I've seen them suffering over there. I'm putting them out of their misery. That's the best thing I can do for them right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But then we get into justification and,
Yeah. Well, and that's where
Yeah.
Ordinary Men comes in.
Yeah.
It walks you down that path of,
Mm-hmm.
where people are writing in their journals, and it shows this change over time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them still, toward the end, were still questioning stuff, but they did it.
Mm-hmm.
They did the IBM of, well, we just need to do an analysis. It's just
Yeah.
our job to do an analysis. Well, what are you analyzing? Well, a couple of things. The most effective way to transport this product that's going to do work for us, and then the most efficient way to eliminate the product and dispose of it. Well, what do you mean by that? What's the product? It's these people. What?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
like, I mean, you want to go down that road, Operation Paperclip, and, the Nazis that became part of our, the American, scientific community, and CIA and everything. Like, I forget what that comedian is, but he apparently sang parody songs. It's like Werner von Braun. He's like, the rockets go up. It's like, where they fall is not my problem.
Yeah.
Said Werner von Braun. It's like, I'm just worried about rockets. I don't care if they blow people up. What's the matter to me? I'm just a scientist.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to probably date myself here, but there was, my son had it on, he was watching MASH. And there was one episode with a pilot who had to jump out of his plane and everything. And he's just like, the war lasts for me 30 minutes a day. I'm up in the beautiful sky. I drop my load and that's all it is. And then Hawkeye introduces them to a little girl whose village got bombed.
Yeah.
And he's like, whose bomb was it? Whose bomb was it? And they say, it doesn't matter to her,
Yeah.
and it's that same situation. It's like, it's one of those that
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
So that's a good example, Jared, actually, is from a comedy, is look at MASH.
Mm-hmm.
They had a bunch.
Oh,
They
yeah.
frequently had the intense moments. Most of it was comedy stuff. But again, we're dealing with comedy. of people getting blown up and coming in with their limbs gone or shot or.
I think a lot of it comes back to,
Dying.
one, we're trying to cope,
Yeah.
and two, look at our lives, your life, my life, whoever. Even when we're going through terrible things, we find ways to relieve our tension, our grief, whatever, with comedy. Go to a funeral. People are telling funny stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's a way to cope. It's a way to feel our humanity without overwhelming ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I don't remember where the guy who passed away, and he had his sons, and they told the family just so they'd be forewarned. But he had him put a speaker in his casket and had a pre-recorded thing
Oh.
where as the casket is being lowered, you hear boom, 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 boom. He's like,
Oh no.
he's like, hey, I'm still in here. He's like, who turned the, like, what are you guys doing?
Oh my goodness.
Get me out of this.
Oh, man.
And the family's
Oh
all
my
laugh like they're
goodness.
at his funeral. He's being lowered into the
Oh
ground,
my
and this
goodness.
speaker is playing. But of course,
Yeah.
like I said, they told them, but everybody was like, that was him.
Yeah.
And he recorded it himself
Yeah.
before he died and told his son, play this from inside my casket when they lower me into the ground.
Crazy.
So I think this is what I think I would summarize as from a comedy in serious writing perspective is I think humor can exist in serious writing within the context of it's not humor for humor's sake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's humor for the sake of building something within that, showing humanity, building connection, showing something that, you know, some element of that world that you want to have a lighter moment and you want to make a connection. But humor there for humor's sake it'll almost be like breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it'll turn people away to where they're like, oh, that, you know, I just couldn't keep reading. It was too
Yeah.
serious a thing. And all of a sudden you've got this comedy thing in here.
Yeah.
The flip side to that is you can take a very serious subject and make the whole thing comical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
if
still
that's your
approach
point.
this. Well, you can
Yeah.
still approach, like with MASH, you can still have
Yeah.
those serious, deep things, or with Fargo, you can still have thriller, suspense, and everything.
Yeah.
But I think your overarching feel has to be either one or the other. Otherwise, I think it'll throw people off.
And
Yeah.
I think even at that, you can engage, in my opinion, you can engage your reader better by infusing some of that because, like I said, humor is disarming.
Yeah.
And so if you're just reading a book and it's, you know, you're tight
The
all
whole
the time,
thing,
you
yeah.
may have a tendency to put that down because, like, I just can't handle that right now. I might come back to it later, or
Yeah.
sometimes those just diffuse that that emotion.
Yeah.
That and I think it also lets your reader connect with your character. Because, like you said, we naturally diffuse situations with humor.
Yeah.
And that's a natural human instinct. So when your character does it, they can see themselves to a certain extent in that character, which I think makes a stronger connection. And especially if you have a series or something like that, there are these terrible situations or scary situations or whatever, but you've also got the humor to, keep it from becoming, like you said, just too much.
Yeah.
Because I've had those where I've put books down because it's just too much. And it's human to not want to face that horrible reality. But then, touching it up and having it there, but keeping it a little bit light at times helps us deal with it versus in your face, always horrible, horrible, horrible. And, I know I'm a very positive person, outlook and stuff like that. And when I get around the negative, it draws me down. And then I'm just like, okay, I can't be around that person or that situation because it takes away from me and who I am.
Yeah.
So I think making that with that connection is important.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we solved
No,
problems today.
that may be one of those unsolvable things, you know.
And maybe, if there's, it'd be interesting. I'd like to find out, maybe if we get some feedback from people, or we pose a question just generically. If you guys think about something and then we let each other know, like, hey,
Yeah.
actually, I came across this story, very serious, but it has these comical elements in it, and it doesn't throw the story off. And we can see. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I love the Stephanie Plum series by Janet Ivanovich, and about a girl who becomes a bounty hunter. And she, especially at the beginning, is the most inept bounty hunter you can find. Yeah. But she's kidnapped. She's put into these dangerous situations and all of this. Like one time she's held at gunpoint, this, that, and the other. And through a series of events, she burns down the funeral home, And it becomes an ongoing joke through the book. She always has her car blowing up, these are very serious things, and she does get into those, and you get that tension, but then you also get the little bits of relief, she's in these life, altering, life changing, life in danger situations. And
so while you were talking about that, and I was picturing what you were saying in my saying as you were talking, because movies play in my head constantly, is I think I found one that works.
Okay.
Breaking Bad.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
It's suspense. But it has humor throughout it. But it's dark subject matter, and frequently tragedy and dark elements. It's not a comedy.
No.
At all. But it's also not Seven.
Yeah.
Or Schindler's List.
Yeah.
But it has it's this very serious perspective of this guy who breaks bad and starts selling drugs because he has cancer and has to figure out how he's going to pay all this money to take care of his family, and he goes down this dark road. But it has comedy stuff in it, almost slapstick type stuff, just about the characters do ridiculous things, and you're like, oh, why would they do that? Oh my gosh. But it is not a comedy.
Yeah.
I might have one. Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Pulp Fiction, that's another good
because there's
one, too.
the most horrific when that
Even
particular parts, I'm like, this is horrible. And then it's like, and they make it funny. You're just like, this is terrible.
But
what are they doing?
But it's not Fargo.
Yeah.
It's not Fargo where it's like when you see it, it's funny because part of it is you're like, that's like real people.
Mm-hmm.
And real people are dumb and funny. and
do the most stupidest things,
yeah. When somebody stubs their toe, you're like, oh, that would hurt so bad.
That's like when your friend trips and falls, you sit there and go, you okay? It's exactly. I'm fine, and then you just laugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like.
So there might be some. I'll have to think about it and see if there's some other good examples.
Yeah.
Where you fit them together. I haven't thought of anything in writing book that fits that.
Well, Stephanie Plum is right.
Stephanie Plum.
Yeah. But
Okay. It was a bit of fun discussion.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Glad you guys were able to come and join with us today.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
And again, lynncombs.com.
Yes.
And Miller Thomas. Look for you on Amazon.
Yes.
And Audible.
Yes.
Okay. So go check them out. Go to Duradim Books. You'll find links to their stuff there as well. And thanks for being with us today. Till next time, go in good spirits. Thanks for listening to the Creators Guild podcast. Don't forget to get your copy of A Flight from Shadows, available on Amazon. While you're there, please rate it and give it a review. If you like the Creators Guild, please like and subscribe, and make sure to share it with your friends. Until next time, go in good spirits.